Welcome to another edition of Have You Heard of Me? I'm James Lott Jr. So this time it's our first book. I've been doing music, TV shows, and movies, mainly from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, some 90s. We already have shows that handle classic Hollywood, which are Forgotten Hollywood, some like a classic, they handle that. I still think some of these time periods are also classic Hollywood, but they're a little later. If you're listening to this, I'm showing a book on screen. You're watching this, obviously you see it. It's called Riot on Sunset Strip, written by Domenic Priore, who's no longer, and Arthur Lee of Love. Arthur Lee is no longer with us. It's rock and roll's last stand in Hollywood. It's a great book. I was given this book by a co-grandparent of one of my grandchildren. Her name is Miss Patty. I love her to death. Thank you, hi Miss Patty. She gave this book because I love the Sunset Strip. I have a personal history of the Sunset Strip, and this is from a time period. This book is a time period that I love in music, which is the '60s and the early to mid '70s. Well, like all kinds of music, but that's like my big thing. And this book focuses on that time period when there was an explosion of folk rock and rock bands playing literally on this small strip of street on Sunset, and some parts, well, below, Troubadour's below on Santa Monica, but above there was Gazzari's, the Rainbow, Whiskey a Go-Go. There's a whole bunch of places that within walking distance. Above the top of the hill, so to speak, in Hollywood and West Hollywood, there was just this area that was just a boon to music. I first encountered Sunset Strip, of course, as a kid, but my time there was the '80s when the hair metal band was happening. I was going there all the time to see Motley Crue and Rat and Poison and Warrant and I mean everything. I mean I was in it. Motley Crue, I was in it to win it. LA Guns, all the bands. I knew some of the band members, knew them. My brothers used to hang out with them. It's a lot of fun. I used to work at a record store called Music Plus Records. We get entry to different kinds of things. I was a little young, but we had a good time. And so I remember that time period. So when she gave me this book, I was like, ooh, I could read about 20 years earlier, basically. When the British invasion came, but a lot of homegrown bands from, like they mentioned, the Doors, the Beach Boys, the Mamas and the Papas, the Turtles, Buffalo Springfield, all those bands that were out here. San Francisco had their thing when I Hate Hashberry, but we had a thing on Sunset Strip. And it's a really comprehensive book that talks about 1965, 1966. And he also mentioned, oh my God, it's so funny, Mother's Invention. My mother had that album, Frank Zappa. The Seeds, the Standells, Electric Prunes, the Leaves, the Velvet Underground, them, the Rolling Stones, the Yardbirds. It talks about a youth culture that was happening. And it was Black, it was white, it was, there's some wore suits, some didn't wear suits, some had long hair, some had short hair. Many of them were trying to bring social issues and sexual issues and racial issues to the forefront. But some really great music came out of it too. God, it was such good music. They mentioned a show called Shindig. Oh my God, it's so funny where the action is. LA was always a boon for music, of course. And my mother played this music when I was born in the late '60s, but she played this music growing up, so I remember it. But it's a great picture book. I mean, so I'm showing this for the people who are watching. It's a great picture book. It has great pictures, great story. It's a great read from someone, in the forest, from someone who was there. Look at that, just some great stuff. The time period. It's a nice, and it's a soft cover. It's very sturdy. It's a heavy book. It's very sturdy. But I do love it. Right on the Sunset Strip. But I want to mention, I'm trying to showcase things that may not be that popular out there. And I try to find him, Domenic Priore. I can't find him. Arthur Love has passed away, but I'm trying to find out where he is. I'm trying to interview him. He's worked before for me. These books I've had. But maybe I'll find him. I'll bring him on the show. It's a follow-up. But this show is all about trying to show you things you may not have heard of that I recommend. And this book, Right on Censorship, I do recommend. Now, I think I saw a copy actually at a bookstore, so maybe try your bookstores. Go on Amazon, of course, or eBay. Someone's selling it there, I'm sure. It's a good read. How many pages is it? Let's see. Capacity. Well, the credits. It's 288 pages, but some of them, the bibliography takes the last like 4 or 5 pages. Oh, and it shows the albums of the time. Oh my goodness, look at all the albums. All the albums. Some of these albums I really grew up with. And what's funny is some of these artists, like I know from the 80s, they were not a part of, they didn't become huge. They're big in the local scene. I know a lot of bands who were just big in the local scene, and that was it. So we want a good read, some good pictures. Riot on Sunset Strip, Domenic Priore. I'm James Lott Jr. Our podcast is everywhere, and we're on YouTube at JLJ Media. And I'll see you next time.